All right. So, welcome to Marching to College, Trading in Boots for Backpacks. This study is around exploring veterans' transition to college, from military service to college. I am Dr. Latasha Henderson. I am a research associate and adjunct professor at Temple University. And my partner here is Dr. Jennifer Johnson, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Greetings, I'm Jennifer Johnson. I'm Associate Dean of Student Success in our College of Education and Human Development at Temple University, and I also serve as an Associate Professor in our Higher Education program.
Great. So, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so we're going to start by talking about the purpose of our study, why we decided to conduct this study. We'll talk about our research questions, and we're also going to just share who student veterans are. So this study, we wanted to focus on institutional policies and practices that are geared to student veterans, and specifically, we wanted to learn about the ways in which student veterans um, received college or have gone through college. And so this study is important because traditional student enrollment is in decline, and institutions have to find new ways to attract a diverse group of students. And so why not develop programming around meeting the needs of student veterans? And so our focus was on learning the needs of student veterans and wanting to understand how these students encounter college. And so we understand that student veterans bring valuable skills and real life experiences to campus, and we wanted to just understand the ways in which they navigate higher education and flow through higher education. And so our research questions that we addressed were: what factors related to military cultural competence influence veterans' college experiences? We also wanted to understand how veterans navigate bureaucratic systems and institutional barriers in higher education. And we wanted to understand ways in which veterans leverage their military experience, self-reliance, and social networks to overcome obstacles in higher education. And so, who are student veterans? These are individuals who have served in the military and are now pursuing post-secondary education. They may be undergraduate or graduate students. They typically are eligible for GI Bill benefits to fund their education, cover tuition and educational expenses. This group is not limited to those who have recently transitioned from the military. It also includes veterans who may have been out of service for a while and have decided to now go back and pursue higher education. And so now we'll talk about some of the barriers that student veterans face in higher education. And so one of the things that we have learned from veterans is they face systemic institutional barriers. Basically, college systems aren't built typically with veterans in mind. And so we have learned from some from veterans that they have they have experiences on their college campuses where they feel like the college doesn't really get them. They don't treat them like the veteran student, the adult student. They feel like most of the systems are geared towards traditional age students. And so, without recognizing the life experiences and responsibilities of veterans, many schools are struggling to keep them engaged and keep them feeling that sense of belonging on campus. And so, policies that don't fit their needs, like complicated websites that don't necessarily address the needs that veterans have, or confusing policies around registration, or even housing opportunities for adult learners. So one of the things that veterans often talk about is just having difficulty finding services on campus that meet their needs. And then there's the rigid credit transfer process. So one of the biggest frustrations for veterans is that they face is their military training and even the courses that they take in college in community college while they're serving don't often get counted towards their academic, their towards their degree program. And so there you'll have veterans who may have taken courses at a community college while they were serving, or they may have taken courses in the military that apply to their joint service transcript that could qualify for college credit, but many colleges aren't recognizing those credits, recognizing that those credits apply to degree programs. And so what that does is it slows the veterans process to degree completion, because now they're having to retake courses that they've already taken or retake courses that they've mastered in the military. And so veterans are often asking or seeking opportunities for institutions to recognize their military service and the classes and the courses that they've taken in service, and also at the community college level. And so this speaks to uh, clear and transparent policies around the credit transfer process for this group of students. And then there's the lack of uh, inclusive support services for veterans. So many colleges do have veteran resource centers on campus, but often those centers don't align with other services that are needed for veterans. So the Veteran Resource Center may offer counseling for GI Bill, or they may help veterans understand their GI Bill benefits. But when it comes to other services like mental health resources that they might need, or academic support that they need, they're often struggling to get those resources those resources from those centers on campus. So this just speaks to institutions giving more inclusive services and resources for this group of students. And then the last thing I'll talk about as it relates to barriers is that sense of belonging on campus. We have veterans who feel like they don't fit in with the rest of the student body, maybe due to their family circumstances, or they just come from a totally different world. Many encounter stereotypes from faculty and other students on campus, and they just find this sense of they find themselves in isolation on campus, both academically and from a social perspective. And so this just speaks to schools creating more spaces for veterans to feel that sense of belonging on campus. And so now I'm just going to speak to the gaps in the research. So most of the research on our student veteran population focuses on their community college, it focuses on community college, not necessarily the four-year institutions. It also focuses on psychological adjustments and structural policies and procedures. So things like mental health, PTSD, maybe some of the disabilities that they might have maybe some of the disabilities attained while they were serving. And so a lot of the research is focused on those types of things. There is a limited research on, like I said, the four-year institutions. Most of them are around the community college level veterans population. And then institutional policy. So a lot of it is focused on military competency, but less focused on the policies around military cultural competency and non-traditional learner experiences as well. And then the last I'll say is around the lack of college access and student success models specifically geared to veterans. There's a need for expansion in those areas where there are policies and there are models for student success and college access for traditional age students, but the non-traditional and then specifically the veteran community is an area there's a major gap in resources that are available. And so I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Johnson for her to talk about our theoretical framework.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So the theoretical framework guiding this work is veterans critical theory, which is used to explore the systematic barriers and institutional inequities shaping veterans' experiences in higher education. So this, building off the work of Phillips and Lincoln, this theory is rooted in critical theory and is composed of 11 tenets. relevant for this work, we are using the theory to really challenge dominant narratives, as illustrated by Dr. Henderson, that frame veteran students' experience in using deficit language, and instead gives an opportunity for us to critique the system and structures in higher education that may perpetuate systemic inequities and fail to recognize the unique experiences that veterans bring to a college campus. This framework is particularly relevant as it allows us to amplify and center veterans' voices in not only the experience of college going and college transitions, but also in the knowledge generation of policies, practices, and procedures to improve outcomes. It also allows for an investigation of the capital drawn upon by students to navigate those challenges. And so we see this as a perfect opportunity to really allow for an investigation of systems and structures as opposed to focusing on students as an issue. With that framework in mind, our methodological approach really focused on, again, centering the voices of our participants, primarily through narrative inquiry, but with also attention to opportunities to gather information from the specific institutions that they attended to really understand some of the resources or resource gaps that were available. So instead of solely focusing on veterans, we also found it valuable to broaden that definition to military affiliated students. And so oftentimes the work is another limitation is that we often kind of lump all students into one category and don't really kind of consider the nuances depending on branch of affiliation, types of institutions students may have attended before while they were in the service, after they've transitioned out of service. And so our study, while initially looking exclusively at veterans, also provided us an opportunity to look at military affiliated students more broadly. With the review of the literature and our theoretical framework, we engaged in thematic analysis using inductive and deductive approaches to, again, identify the key themes that shape those students' experience and really look at structural, cultural, and institutional barriers that impact access to and success in navigating college. Next, just want to highlight our participants. As you can see, it is a very diverse sample of participants who engaged in this work. The findings that we're sharing today is based on interviews with 17 veterans who participated in this larger study. We recognize the importance of confidentiality, and so the names listed there are pseudonyms, and we very broadly categorize their affiliations as not to reveal individual information. The participants reflect a diverse array of backgrounds as well. We have 5 participants that were women and 12 men. We have a diverse range of racial and ethnic identities, including 9 who identified as Caucasian and white, 3 as Latinx, 2 as African American and Black, 2 as multiracial, 1 is Asian Pacific Islander, and 1 as Native American Lakota. As you can see, participants have affiliations across various branches of the military, and their educational backgrounds are quite diverse as well in terms of the institutions that they're affiliated with at the time of their interview. Moreover, there was some diversity in the ranges of fields of study, which we saw also shaped their perceptions of their navigation through the college experience. And we saw some trends and opportunities to further explore some of those nuances by major as well. So next we'll share some of the key findings that came from our study and engagement with those 17 participants.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. So our study revealed four key areas that hinder student veterans access to and success in higher education. So the first is the lack of cultural competence. So I talked about that a little bit earlier around cultural competence, but now I'm going to share some specific quotes from our participants as it relates to cultural competence. So one of the things that I will share is that many institutions lack a deep understanding of military culture and their lived experiences. So this often disconnects uh, the institution from veterans in a sense that the policies and practices don't necessarily reflect the needs of this diverse student group. And so one participant, James, shared that he played basketball for his college. And when he got to his first practice, the other students knew he was a veteran, and he shared that many of his teammates would ask questions like, "Did you kill anybody?" And questions of those of that nature, like around his military experience. And he said he felt like he was almost like Rambo to them. And this experience for him just highlights that lack of cultural competence and just the idea of stereotypes around military culture, which can sometimes be unintentionally harmful for that veteran who feels like they have to justify their service to those asking those questions. And so James's experience just highlights the need for more cultural competence on campus from student perspective, faculty perspective, administrative perspective, just an idea around that willingness to understand their unique needs and the differences that they bring to campus. Next is the bureaucratic systems. So this is what we call red tape. And it's, like I said before, the confusing transfer credit evaluations, inconsistency in rules and residency rules, and also housing situations and circumstances, meeting the needs of adult learners who may have families. Many of the veterans that we interviewed have a spouse, some have children. And so their desire would be to live on campus or live in a neighborhood near campus, and having um, they often shared that they struggled with finding resources to meet those family needs. And so it's important for institutions to understand that. One participant in particular, Perry, suggested that faculty and staff on campuses undergo green zone training, a training that educates them on the experiences and the challenges that veterans face. And so he emphasized that institutions that offer that one size fit all approach to higher education just is ineffective for veterans and meeting their needs. The next thing that we found was a lack of social networks on campus. And that speaks to just that idea of building that sense of belonging for veterans. They have a space or places where they can commune and fellowship with other veterans, fellowship with folks who understand their experiences, and where they don't feel like they have to fight that stereotype that they often face on campus. And so one participant, Milton, shared that he lives in a veteran house on campus. And he said that house is owned by his institution, and that it's just his place of where he found community. And he uses his resources, the other veterans in the house, as his resource to learn about campus, learn about campus life. And it just works for him. And he felt that he chose his institution because of the fact that they had that veterans house and that separate housing for his community. And he said he gets a sense of belonging on campus because he has a community of folks he can rely on. And so having dedicated housing spaces and spaces for veterans, veteran groups, student groups and organizations and affinity groups helps veterans find that camaraderie on campus, and helps them with that emotional support and makes their transition to college and through college a lot easier. And then there's the last thing is the sense of self-reliance. So one of the strengths that veterans bring to campus is their ability to be self-reliant. However, in a world where things can be challenging or confusing, it it makes it difficult for veterans because they're so self-reliant and they just have this idea that they have to figure it out. It causes them to be hesitant to ask for questions or to ask for help. And so they found themselves a lot of times not reaching out to professors or other resources for the help that they need. So our participant Darian shared that his Veterans Resource Office was very helpful and responsive, and they gave him the information that he needed. However, it was only the information that he asked for. It wasn't, he couldn't, he had to figure out what questions to ask in order to get the answers that he needed. So he felt like if the institution had a website that was specifically geared towards the veteran community, or a page on the website that would answer a lot of the questions that they might have, it would have been helpful because you don't know what you don't know. So if he said a lot of times he didn't know what to ask. And so, or what questions to ask, which left him feeling that gap in information. So just that idea of self-reliance and understanding that that is a part of the veterans community and being able to provide resources that help them understand what they don't know. And so we'll talk about some of the implications from our study. And so what do these findings mean? So what does everything that I just shared mean in the grand scheme of things? And so I'll say, first and foremost, we're seeing patterns that point to deeper systemic issues that are affecting the student veteran population. So institutions are not necessarily equipped with the resources that they need to support to support the student group. There's a need for more cultural competency and understanding military culture. Uh, Decomplicating some of the bureaucratic systems that are in place now. So, for example, financial aid, one of the big things that veterans pointed out around financial aid is having institutions that understand that the need for institutional aid is something that they want. They don't want to have to exhaust their VGI bill to get through college. They would like to be able to qualify for institutional aid like traditional aid students do and be able to save those GI Bill funds for graduate school or maybe to pass down to one of their family members who wants to go to college later. So having an understanding of that around institutional policies would be great. And then also finding ways to make more meaningful connections on campus for veterans, creating opportunities for veterans to get more involved on campus and finding ways to even incorporate their family members into those experiences as well is something that came up a lot from our veterans, and just helping them to understand that they're not in it alone, allowing them to release their self-reliance a little bit and really focus in on pointing them to the resources that they need and giving them the ability to be able to go and ask for the help that they need. And then the last thing that I'll share is around what scholars can do, policymakers and institutions can do to improve resources and services for veterans. So I'll say from a scholar perspective, we have to push this narrative more. We need to push this research further. We can't stop at just identifying the problems. We actually need to find ways to resolve them, finding ways to resolve the financial aid concerns, housing concerns, resource concerns. And also in terms of policymakers, number one, learn military cultural competency, understand the military community first and foremost, because without understanding them, you can't help them. So understanding them is simply having conversations with them. If there's not a specific training you want to go through, maybe just have a conversation with them, ask them what their life is like in college, finding ways that we can help them. So policymakers having those conversations. And one of our participants shared that many times institutions make policies without even speaking to us. They don't even talk to us. They'll make a change that isn't even relevant. So having those conversations with veterans before you make changes. And then from the institution's perspective, again, pushing that military cultural competency to understand the military community, creating strong peer networks on campus. So talking to faculty and staff, many of those folks are former military. They might be veterans as well. Bringing them into the conversations as well, having them serve as mentors to student veterans. That's another good way to engage that community. And then rethinking financial aid policies around institutional aid, not forcing veterans to use their GI Bill before they gain institutional aid is also something that would be helpful for this community.
So to reiterate, the key implications really call for a need for policy reform, targeted support services, and particularly given ongoing concerns about affordability and paying for college, really making sure that there is opportunity for institutional aid for our students so that they don't rely on GI Bill benefits, especially if those are not guaranteed. So in conclusion, it's if we take this work together uh, from the lived experiences of the participants, advocacy is key. And advocacy should also include the students that are impacted by these policies and reforms. So institutional leaders should partner with their student veterans to engage in ongoing advocacy at the state and federal level. Again, so important to have strategic initiatives around student support that does not um, stereotype the possible needs of students, but is really using data to know the needs of students and making sure that those systems and services and resources are integrated across the campus through cross-campus collaboration, really making sure that there is a opportunity to build the competency among our professionals at all level, faculty, staff, and leaders, so that there is more information about how best to serve the population. That can be done through research, innovation, and engaging with scholars who have this area of expertise as a core focus of their work to bring in and partner to have a better sense of those institutional opportunities. And then finally, raising awareness, engaging in communities in this work is critically important. As I shared, this study is focusing on veterans, but the larger body of work is also looking at military affiliated students. And so, not just the veterans themselves, but the spouses of veterans, the children of veterans. How are they navigating the college experience, and how does that connection inform some of the recommendations that we're sharing? So we thank you for your interest in this work. We hope to have an opportunity to engage you more. Our contact information is shared here.